So let's now understand the life cycle of a JSF application. So the life cycle consists of 6 stages: restore view, apply request values, perform validation, update model, invoke action, and render response. So even though this seems to be a bit complex, believe me, it isn't. Now let's say the page is requested for the first time. So the index page is requested first. So over here, when we enter the restore view phase, a server-side component tree gets created, and the components are what the components we have put in the page. For example, in our page, we have head, we have body, we have form component, we have input text component, along with the message components, and we have command button component. So for each component, a server-side component gets created. So as you can see, for each component in the page, there is a corresponding UI component over here in the tree. And since the index page was accessed for the first time, none of these stages execute. We directly come from this phase to this phase. In this phase, render response, each component renders itself. For example, the edge head tag renders itself as the head tag. The edge body tag renders itself as the body tag. The edge form tag renders itself as the form tag. The HTML input text tag renders itself as input type is equal to text, and so on. And this is what the client or the browser receives. So for example, if you see over here the source of this page, this is what is returned by this phase. This is the HTML which was written over here. Now we can enter some values and submit the page. So what happens when you click the submit button? We again go to the life cycle. Now in this life cycle, in the first stage, this tree was created when we first requested the page. So right now, when the user submits the form, we do not create the tree again. We just restore it which was saved previously when the first time the page was requested. And that's why this stage is named as restore view. Now in the second stage, whatever values the user has entered are entered in the respective components over here. That's why the phase is known as apply request values. Now in the third stage, all the fields are validated. Basically all the input fields are validated. For example, if we had put some validators like this, or if we had used some converters, all those conversions and validations occur in this phase. However, if any validation or conversion errors are there, we directly go to the render response phase. We do not go to the next phases. So let's assume all the values are valid. So we enter this phase, update model. So in this phase, if your input tags, that is this and this, are bound to values like this over here and over here. If they're bound, then those fields are populated from these components. If the bean doesn't exist, then the bean gets created and these fields get populated. So in the next phase, invoke action, any action or action listener method associated with the command controls gets executed. So in our case, the command button is associated with save animal method. So that gets executed in this phase. And in the last phase, each component renders itself. So the head is rendered as head, HTML input text is rendered as input type text, and so on. And this is how your lifecycle works through these 6 phases. So when the page is requested for the first time, the component tree gets created and directly go to the render response phase. And when we submit the page, it goes through all the 6 phases from here to here. Now let's say we add a new button to a form and the action points to cancel. As you know, it's implicit navigation and the page is over here. And the page looks like this. So usually in your forms we have such fields that either you submit the form or you cancel, and when you cancel you usually go to some other page in your site. Now let's see what happens when I press the cancel button. So as you can see, all the validations in your page have been executed. So because it goes through the life cycle, we get some validation errors over here. So basically this is not the behavior expected of the cancel button. The user presses the cancel button only when he is not interested in filling in this form and he just wants to go to some other page. So to avoid the cancel button from validating the values, we have to enter attribute over here. So the value is, rather the attribute is immediate. So when we mention immediate is equal to true for any command controls, the action gets executed in apply request values phase. Usually the action is executed over here. Instead of that, the action gets executed in this phase. And because the action gets executed, all these stages are bypassed. And whenever the action gets executed, you directly go to the render response phase. So let's press the cancel button, which is immediate set to true. And we properly go to the page.